Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a big day. It's a monumentous day, okay? If you don't know anything about me, it's possible that I maybe have an affinity for Matt Reeves, the Batman. I maybe really love that movie. Maybe might be like my favorite comic book movie of all time. It's possible that I might have somewhat of an affinity for this iteration of the character. um, so the next step in the Batman saga, the next installment, whatever you want to call it, uh, it's kind of a big deal, and may or may not have incredibly high expectations for like then whatever the next installment would be, and I gotta say, this is fantastic. This show is absolutely fantastic. I mean, first of all, it does a great job of just feeling like it's in the Batman universe. I mean, you get into the first episode and they're doing a recap of what happened at the end of the Batman. Like they bring up the flood. They got to talk about Batman. He's not in the show. They've kind of come out and said that Robert Pattinson isn't going to show up at all. I can confirm that he's not in the first episode. Of course, they could be lying. After Andrew Garfield, there's no trust. You can't trust anybody anymore. So it's still possible that he pops up at some point, but so far he's not in it. But like they still talk about him. His sort of presence is still kind of felt. And they also really nail like the look of the Batman, like the lighting and the cinematography. It all feels very faithful to what they did on that film. The only times where it didn't quite look as good as the movie would be like whenever they would show like wide shots of, or like establishing shots of the city and of the buildings and of like trains and stuff like that. And to be honest, I think that mostly just comes down to it being on TV and the CGI just not being as good. It's like there are some times where it's like it's a CGI building over there. It's not real, and I can very much tell it's not real. There were some shots like that, but overall, like the cinematography and the lighting and all of that, great. Feels like what Greg Fraser did on the Batman, which is very impressive because Greg Fraser is not exactly an easily replicatable person in Hollywood. It feels like he's the only guy that even knows how to use the volume. But yeah, so I think they did a great job. Speaking of looking like the Batman, the makeup on Colin Farrell still looks fantastic. I mean, it looks just as good as the movie. Like Colin Farrell's performance is still just as good as he was in the Batman. Like, it's actually kind of interesting because, yesterday Agatha All Along had their series premiere as well, and we're kind of getting two Marvel and DC shows that are about like side characters that the actors just put on such good performances that they were just like, well, we got to give you a spin-off show. And yeah, Colin Farrell is still great. He's very like easy. He's very easily being a leading man and leading his own show. And I gotta say, like obviously I'm talking about how this is very much a follow up to the Batman. This is in the Batman universe, and it's like just yet another DC show and the legacy of DC and of the Batman mythos and whatnot. So it obviously has that legacy and all of that lore behind it. But something that I also wasn't necessarily thinking about until like a couple weeks ago when I was kind of like listening to interviews and just sort of thinking about the show is that, and it was especially confirmed watching this first episode, is that this is also very much like the next like proper attempt at HBO doing like a mobster show, like since The Sopranos. I don't think they've quite done anything like The Sopranos again, if I'm mistaken, because I think The Wire, I haven't seen The Wire, but I don't think that that's quite The Sopranos. I think they also did like Downton Abbey, but that's like I think set in like Prohibition era, so I don't even know if that necessarily counts. But like aside from those two shows, I don't think that they've ever like tried to recapture the magic of The Sopranos. One thing that is definitely the case with this is that this is HBO trying to do to do The Sopranos again, and yeah, I honestly think that it succeeds in that as well. Like, it is a mob show, but and it's a drama, and but there's also like a lot of humor here. Like I was kind of surprised at how much humor there was, um, and like the music feels very like at times it almost like I was just surprised at how often it, it like the music was like kind of upbeat and kind of like not, like bomb 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 like the Batman. And it just it felt very Sopranos. um and it definitely succeeds at it, and I do want to point this out as well. It also doesn't feel like it's just trying to rip off the Sopranos. It still feels very fresh and like it's doing its own thing, and I think that that is in large part due to it being a part of the Batman universe. Like, there are a lot of things in it that make it feel almost a little more fantastical, that also sets it apart from the Sopranos. Like the fact that the drugs in the show aren't real drugs. Like the drugs that get dealt are called drop. They're like these drugs that you like drop in your eyeballs. And it's cool because it's like made up fantasy drugs, and it sort of like, again, like just sets it apart from the Sopranos, makes it feel like it's a part of the Batman universe, and it just makes it sort of just helps the sort of like timeless feeling that the Batman tried to achieve. So all of that is great. And the other cool thing about the show is that it's like, again, a part of the Batman show, and it also does a really great job of sort of setting up the broader world of the Batman, and more so the criminal underbelly. So we get introduced to like the Falcones, and we learn a little bit more about how their operations work, and like how like the drugs get dealt, and stuff like that. We also get introduced to Salvatore Maroni, and we start seeing like the beginnings of, I don't think this is a spoiler, because it's like when you watch the trailer and when you hear the pitch of the show, it's the Penguin's rise to power. If you know anything about Batman, you know that the Salvatores and the Maronis have like a drug war, like have like a mob war or whatever, and the more fantastical Batman villains end up rising to power. Like, we know what this show is, so in this first episode they very much start setting up like the Salvatores and the Maronis starting a gang war. And yeah, seeing just learning more about the criminal underbelly of Gotham is really cool. I gotta say, by far the standout like character that gets introduced in this episode is Sophia Falcone. She's played by Kristen Milioti. I really liked her in Palm Springs. That was a comedy movie that came out a few years ago with Andy Samberg. That's a really great comedy. She was great in that. I also really liked her in How I Met Your Mother, the final season. She played the mother, if you'll remember. I've never seen her do anything like she's doing here in this show, and she is absolutely fantastic. I don't necessarily want to spoil anything about her character, but just needless to say, Kristen Milioti, she's an actress. I appreciate her talents. I mean that unironically and facetiously. I'm forgetting the word. Forgetting the word of what I'm trying to say. Anyways, I appreciate her, and I just want to say that I have no interest in trying to fix her character. I only want to enable her. I'll just leave it at that. If you've seen the episode, you know what I mean. And now I will say, when you get to this next part that I'm going to highlight, that is when the show really starts running the risk of being like, okay, you're trying to do the Sopranos over here, and he does have like a relationship with his mom as well that he's taking care of, um, and when you get to this point in the episode, it is kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? What are we doing? We're just copying the Sopranos now. I'm an Italian mobster. What are we doing here? But when you get into what his relationship with his mom is actually like, and I don't necessarily want to spoil it, but when you get into it, it's like, oh, yeah, this isn't necessarily, this is unique from The Sopranos. So that is something that I do want to point out, is that yes, there are many points in this in the episode where it's like, you're doing The Sopranos, oh, we're The Sopranos over here. But it also does a good job of feeling unique from it. And yeah, man, like I absolutely loved it. I think that it lives up to the hype of what like critics have been making it out to be. It lives up to the expectations of what, I just have for for this universe from the Batman, how good it was. And even in some cases it kind of exceeds the Batman, right? Um like with this being a TV show, and it, us really being able to just sit with these characters, and like the dialogue in this show is really well written, and whereas the Batman was able to rely on like beautiful cinematography and throw in a big action scene where Batman is fighting a bunch of guys. The show doesn't really have that liberty. I mean, it does, to be, like there are a couple of action scenes in here, but for the most part, it's just Penguin talking and talking with different characters, and the dialogue is really strong. The performances are fantastic, and it's a good character study of Oswald, or sorry, Oz. I forget, they like changed his name or something. I think he's just called Oswald or Oz Cobb. I think they're not calling him Cobblepot. I remember reading, because they were like, oh, we want to be grounded, so Cobblepot is too fantastical of a name. That's kind of silly, to be fair, but it's fine. It works. What was I saying? Oh yeah, sorry. It's very like this show especially is just like very character focused, and in some ways it is better than the Batman in that sense, just by virtue of it being a show. And the other thing that this show is doing is that it is rated TVMA. The Batman is a movie that very much sort of pushes the edges of PG-13. Like it feels like a movie that wants to be rated R but can't, because it's a Batman movie. This show doesn't pull any punches so far, which I also super appreciate. It makes me wonder if maybe there's a chance we could maybe get an R-rated Batman too, maybe, because watching this, it makes me think back to the Batman and being like, yeah, I kind of wouldn't have minded to see them just kind of go for it in certain scenes in that movie and not cut away. So we'll see. But it probably won't happen, but one can dream. But yeah, let me know if you're going to watch The Penguin. Let me know if you have already seen it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, or whatever YouTubers tell you to do, because I didn't do a spoiler review for the premiere, but moving forward, I'll be doing week-to-week coverage, and I will be doing spoiler discussions of the following episodes, because why the hell would you watch a review of The Penguin episode 2 if you're not already watching the show? So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.